I remember the first time I met my husband. It was one of those perfect days that feel like a scene from a movie. We were both at the park, me, lost in my book, and him, out for a jog. He stopped to ask me for directions, and we ended up talking for hours. It was as if the world had conspired to bring us together. He was everything I had ever wanted, kind, funny, and attentive. Our connection was instant, and it didn't take long for us to fall in love. We were inseparable, and when he proposed a year later, I knew in my heart that this was the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. But life has a way of changing when you least expect it. It was an ordinary day, or at least it started that way. I had been working from home and needed a change of scenery, so I decided to head to my favorite coffee shop to catch up on some emails. As I stood in line, waiting to order, I felt someone's gaze on me. When I turned, I saw Alex standing there, smiling. I didn't think much of it at first, a friendly smile, a nod of acknowledgement. But when he struck up a conversation while we waited for our orders, there was an instant connection. He was charming, with an easy confidence that made me feel at ease. We talked about the rain, our work, and somehow, without me even realizing it, the conversation turned more personal. I found myself laughing, something I hadn't done in a while. "You seem like you need a break," he said, as if he could read my mind. "Why don't we sit together? It's more fun than working alone." I knew this was a bad idea, even before I sat down. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on me. Part of me wanted to turn around, walk out, and pretend I never saw him. But another part, the part that had been longing for something more, was curious, drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain. I hesitated, knowing I should politely decline, but instead, I agreed. We spent the next 2 hours talking, sharing stories about our lives, and by the time I left, I had his number saved in my phone. That meeting felt like a breath of fresh air, something new and exciting in a life that had started to feel mundane. I didn't realize it then, but that was the moment everything began to change. The days that followed were a blur of emotions: guilt, excitement, fear. I tried to push him out of my mind, to focus on my husband and our life together, but it was like fighting against a tide that kept pulling me back. Why was I doing this? My husband loved me, cared for me, and yet here I was, flirting with the idea of something forbidden. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the fall would be devastating, but still being unable to step back. I told myself this was harmless, just coffee, just talking, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. There was something in the way he looked at me, the way his words lingered in the air that made it clear this was more than just a casual conversation. A few weeks later, I found myself making excuses to see him again. It was a Saturday evening, and I told to my husband that I was meeting some friends for dinner. He barely looked up from the TV, just nodded and told me to have fun. I felt a pang of guilt as I kissed him goodbye, but I pushed it aside. As I drove to meet Alex, my mind raced with a mix of excitement and fear. What if someone saw us? What if my husband found out? But as soon as I saw him, all my worries melted away. Being with him felt like an escape from reality, a secret world where nothing else mattered. I knew I was playing with fire, but I convinced myself that I could keep the two worlds separate. After all, it was just a harmless fling, right? "You seem distant," he said, his hand lightly touching mine. "Are you okay?" I looked at him, searching for the right words, but they wouldn't come. How could I tell him about the war raging inside me? The part of me that wanted to be here, and the part that knew it was a betrayal of everything I had ever believed in? My mind flashed back to my husband, to the life we had built together. I loved him, I really did. But in this moment with Alex, I felt something different, something that scared me and thrilled me all at once. "I'm just thinking," I said finally, squeezing his hand. He didn't press further, just leaned in and kissed me. It was a gentle kiss, but it felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. I kissed him back, my heart pounding, and in that moment, everything else disappeared. When I returned home, my husband was sitting on the couch watching TV. He looked up and smiled at me, asking how my day had been. I smiled back, my heart pounding, and gave him the story I had rehearsed in my head, how the errands had taken longer than expected, how I'd grabbed dinner with a friend. I felt sick to my stomach, the lies coming so easily now. He had no reason to doubt me, no reason to suspect that anything was wrong, but as I sat down beside him, the guilt was overwhelming. I could barely look him in the eye. "I'm glad you had a good day," he said, leaning over to kiss me. I forced myself to kiss him back, my mind screaming with guilt. This was the man I loved, the man I had promised to be faithful to, and I had spent the day betraying. I wanted to confess, to tell him everything and beg for forgiveness. But I couldn't. The fear of losing him, of destroying our life together, kept me silent. So I smiled, pretended everything was fine, and buried the guilt deep. I agreed to meet again, telling myself it would be the last time. I needed closure, I told myself, a way to end whatever this was before it went too far. But as I sat there, looking into his eyes, I felt my resolve slipping away. Every rational part of me screamed to walk away, to go home to my husband and forget this ever happened. But I was caught in the moment, in the thrill of being wanted, of being seen in a way that felt new and intoxicating. I wanted to be strong, to make the right choice, but I was tired of fighting. "You know, we don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with," he said, his voice soft, but I could hear the underlying tension. "But I can't deny that I want you." I hesitated, my heart racing. I don't know," I stammered. The words felt weak, like a desperate attempt to hold on to the last shred of control I had. He didn't push, just waited, and in that silence, I felt the weight of my decision pressing down on me. This was the moment. I could still walk away, still choose to protect what mattered most to me, but the pull was too strong, the desire too overwhelming, and in that moment of weakness, I made a choice that would change everything. Living a double life. I became paranoid, constantly checking my phone, making up excuses, and hiding the truth. I felt like a stranger in my own home, distancing myself from the man who trusted me completely. I had been so careful, so sure that I had covered my tracks. But every time he looked at me, I felt a cold knot of fear tightening in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew, that somehow he had found out. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and serious. My heart skipped a beat as I stepped closer, trying to read his expression. He didn't look up at me, just kept staring at his phone on the table. The air was thick with tension, and I felt like I was walking into a trap. I tried to stay calm, to keep my voice steady. "What's wrong?" I asked, forcing a smile. But he didn't respond right away, and the silence was deafening. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what he knew and how he could have found out. "I got a call today," he said finally, his voice tight. "From Amy. She saw you at the park last Saturday. Said you were with someone I don't know." My stomach dropped. I hadn't expected this. A mutual friend had seen you with your affair partner and called your husband, concerned and confused. I felt like the ground had fallen out from under me. I had been so careful, but I hadn't accounted for this. A chance encounter, someone seeing us together. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely think. How could I explain this? I tried to come up with an excuse, to lie my way out of it, but the words wouldn't come. "It's not what you think," I started, but even I didn't believe it. He finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with hurt and anger. "Don't lie to me," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I saw the messages. I went through your phone while you were in the shower. I know everything." My blood ran cold. I'd been so careful to delete the messages, but there must have been something I missed. A photo, an email, a text, hidden in an archived folder. He had gone through my phone and found the evidence I thought I had erased. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But the words felt hollow, useless. How could I make him understand what even I couldn't fully explain? He shook his head, pushing the phone across the table toward me. "How could you do this to me? To us? After everything we've been through?" His voice cracked, and I could see the tears in his eyes. He had always trusted me, and now that trust was shattered. I wanted to reach out, to hold him, to tell him that I loved him, that I was sorry, that I would do anything to make it right. But I knew it wouldn't matter. The damage was done, and there was no going back. We sat there in silence for what felt like hours, the weight of what I had done hanging between us. I could see the pain in his eyes, the disbelief, and it broke my heart. But I knew that nothing I could say would change what I had done. "I need some time to think," he said finally, standing up and walking toward the door. "I can't even look at you right now." The finality in his voice was like a knife to my heart. I watched him leave, the door closing softly behind him, and I knew that my life would never be the same. I sat there in the dark, alone with my guilt, and realized that I had lost the one person who had ever truly loved me. The affair that had once felt exciting and thrilling now felt like a poison, slowly destroying everything I had ever cared about. After he left, I spent hours replaying everything in my mind, the lies, the deception, the moment he found out. I'd been so focused on what I wanted, on the thrill of something new, that I hadn't stopped to think about the consequences. I destroyed the man I loved, the life we had built together, and for what? A fleeting moment of excitement, a secret that had spiraled out of control. I wanted to take it all back, to undo the damage, but I knew it was too late. The night after he found out, I barely slept. As I walked into the kitchen, the air felt heavy, suffocating. I could see him sitting there, lost in his thoughts, and I knew that whatever was coming next would change everything. I wanted to say something to break the silence, but I was terrified of what he might say. "Can we talk?" I asked softly, my voice trembling. He didn't respond at first, just kept staring out the window. Finally, he turned to look at me, his eyes filled with a coldness I had never seen before. "I've been up all night thinking," he said, his voice calm but distant. "I keep asking myself how we got here, how the woman I married could do something like this." He paused, and the silence hung in the air like a weight. "I loved you. I trusted you with everything I had, and now I don't know if I can ever trust you again." His words cut through me like a knife. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the battle between the love he still had for me and the betrayal he couldn't shake. I wanted to reach out, to beg for forgiveness, but I knew that it wasn't that simple. "I know I've hurt you," I said, tears welling up in my eyes. "I would do anything to take it back, to make things right. Please, just give me a chance to fix this." He shook his head, his expression pained. "It's not that easy," he replied, his voice cracking. "What you did, it's not something I can just forget. Every time I look at you now, all I can see is the betrayal. I don't know if we can come back from this." I felt my heart shatter at his words. The reality of what I had done was sinking in, and I realized that I might have lost him forever. The one person who had always been there for me, who had loved me unconditionally, was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. For days, we barely spoke. The silence between us grew wider, the distance more unbearable. I could see him withdrawing, pulling away from me, and I knew what was coming. But I wasn't ready to accept it. I wasn't ready to lose him. Every moment felt like I was on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to give way. I watched him from a distance, hoping for a sign, a glimmer of hope that he might stay, that we might somehow find a way to heal. but deep down, I knew that the damage was too great. "I need to go away for a while," he said finally, breaking the silence. He didn't look at me as he spoke, just focused on packing his things. "I need time to think, to figure out what I want, what we're going to do." I felt like the world was crumbling beneath me. I wanted to scream, to beg him not to leave, but the words stuck in my throat. I knew that he needed space, that forcing him to stay would only make things worse, but the thought of him walking out that door of our life together, slipping away, was too much to bear. "Please don't go," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "We can work through this. I'll do anything. Just please don't leave me." He stopped packing for a moment, finally turning to look at me. The pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I need time to figure out if I can ever forgive you, if I can ever trust you again." I watched him close the suitcase, the finality of the moment hitting me like a tidal wave. This was it. The life we had built, the love we had shared was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I had pushed him too far, and now I was paying the price. He stood at the door for what felt like an eternity, his hand on the doorknob. I wanted to reach out, to hold him, to tell him that I loved him, but I knew that nothing I could say would change his mind. He needed to leave, and I needed to let him. I felt numb, like I was watching someone else's life unfold before my eyes. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. We were supposed to grow old together, to face life's challenges side by side. But now, because of my actions, that future was slipping through my fingers. "I'll call you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just need time." He looked at me one last time, and in his eyes I saw a glimmer of the love we once had, the love I had taken for granted. "I love you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." But he didn't respond. He just nodded, turned the knob, and walked out the door. I stood there, watching him walk away, the weight of what I had done crashing down on me. I had betrayed the man I loved, and now I was watching him leave, knowing that I might never get him back. After he left, the house felt emptier than ever. The life we had shared, the memories we had made, all seemed to haunt me in that silence. I was left alone with my guilt, my regrets, and the knowledge that I had brought this on myself. I took a deep breath and typed out a message to Alex. "This has to stop. I can't see you anymore. I'm sorry, but I need to focus on my marriage, on trying to fix what I've broken." I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the send button, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I hit send and watched as the message disappeared, knowing that this was the last time I would reach out to him. I had made my choice, and it was time to face the consequences. I never saw him again after that day. No calls, no messages, no goodbyes. It was as if he had vanished from my life as quickly as he had appeared, and while a part of me felt the loss, I knew that it was for the best. I was driving aimlessly, trying to escape the guilt that had been eating away at me since my husband found out. The rain was pouring down, the road slippery, and my mind was elsewhere until it was too late. When I woke up, I wasn't sure where I was or how I got there. My body ached, and everything felt surreal. The last thing I remembered was the crash, the sound of metal twisting, and then nothing. As the fog in my mind started to clear, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned my head slowly, and there he was, my husband, standing in the doorway, his face etched with worry and pain. "Thank God you're okay," he said, rushing to my side. His voice was thick with emotion, and I could see the tears in his eyes. "When they called me, I thought I'd lost you." I could barely hold back my own tears. The guilt and shame of what I had done came crashing down on me all over again. I had hurt him so much, and now, here he was, worried about me, caring for me despite everything. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, my voice weak and trembling, "for everything, for the affair, for hurting you. I don't deserve your forgiveness." I felt the tears start to fall, unable to stop them. He took my hand gently, squeezing it as he sat down beside me. "What you did hurt me more than you'll ever know," he said, his voice soft but steady. "But seeing you like this, knowing how close I came to losing you, none of that matters anymore. I don't want to live in the past. I want to move forward, together." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, he was willing to forgive me, to give us another chance. The relief, the gratitude, the overwhelming love I felt in that moment was indescribable. "I don't deserve you," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "But I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." He leaned in and kissed my forehead, his own tears finally falling. "We'll get through this," he said. "We'll heal together." In that hospital room, surrounded by the echoes of what could have been, we found a way back to each other. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, we were ready to face it together. The accident may have been a wake-up call, a harsh reminder of what truly mattered. And in that moment, with forgiveness and love, we chose to move forward, to heal and to rebuild what we had almost lost.